In a distant council chamber far from Earth, one human officer stands alone to answer for a disaster that killed hundreds. On the record, he is the man blamed for the deaths at Halcyon Transfer Station. But as the hearing begins, it becomes clear that this is not just a trial. It is the opening crack in something much larger. Because the real danger may not be what happened in the station, but who wanted the truth buried after it. The chamber of the Interstellar Conduct Council hung over Meridian Prime, a black arc of metal and light above a clouded world far from Earth. Captain Adrian Vale stood alone at the witness platform, and everyone in the room knew why. 38 civilians, 12 medical staff, and 211 dock workers had died at Halcyon Transfer Station. Adrian was the only Earth officer in uniform who had walked out alive. On the official record, his role was simple. He was the former security commander of the Earth Relief Escort vessel Resolute Dawn, assigned to the emergency supply corridor through the narrow reach, and called now as the principal witness in the inquiry into the Halcyon deaths. But nothing about this day felt simple. If he failed here, Earth would not just lose one case. It could lose standing across a block of systems already pushing to force human ships out of key corridors, block human aid teams from mixed colonies, and label human officers as destabilizing actors in disputed sectors. The chamber had been built to make any individual feel smaller than the system judging them. Tier upon tier of polished seats curved above him in a giant half circle, each platform shaped for a different species, each lit by its own soft color field. The acoustics were perfect. That meant every pause, every breath, every strain in a witness's voice could travel all the way to the far wall. Adrian kept his hands flat on the witness rail and breathed through the pressure in his ribs. His left shoulder still hurt when he stood too long. The medics had sealed the torn muscle and rebuilt part of the shattered collar line, but repair did not erase memory. Whenever his pulse climbed, the old pain climbed with it. To his right sat the Earth delegation beneath a cool white seal. Ambassador Lena Marr held herself with the stillness of someone who knew how to hold a line without moving a muscle. Beside her sat two legal advisors, one military observer and Undersecretary Paul Aridin from Earth External Affairs, who had spent the last 12 hours quietly urging Adrian to keep his answers narrow. To Adrian's left sat the prosecuting desk for the Council Inquiry Authority. High Advocate Cell Core, tall even while seated, rested four gray hands on the edge of his console. His species, the Varesh, were famous for measured speech and weaponized patience. Core had already built a public case through the live media feeds before the hearing even opened. Human panic, human overreaction, human force used inside a protected civilian hub. Behind Core sat representatives of the Valoran Trade Combine and the Ilia Concord, the two powers pressing hardest for sanctions. Halcyon had served all three corridors. Its destruction had already caused shortages on outlying worlds. No one in that block needed the truth as badly as they needed a culprit. Above them all, centered beneath the great circular emblem of the Council, sat presiding Arbiter Tain Voss. Voss was old enough that no one was certain which war had first made his name. He had the stillness of a man who had spent decades listening to lies dressed as order. Adrian had read everything he could about him and trusted none of it. A low tone rolled through the chamber. The public gallery dimmed. The feeds went live. Voss looked down from the central dais. Captain Adrian Vale of Earth, you understand that this hearing is binding, archived, and visible across member systems. I understand, Adrian said. You will answer with precision. I will. Voss turned a page on the translucent file before him. The matter before this chamber concerns the destruction of Halcyon Transfer Station on the 14th day of the Meridian cycle, the deaths that followed, and the allegation that Earth security personnel initiated lethal escalation inside a protected civilian environment. High Advocate Core, you may proceed. Core rose slowly, as though the outcome was already a matter of procedure. Captain Vale, let us begin with what is not disputed. Your vessel entered Halcyon on a restricted emergency lane at 0341 station time. Your personnel moved armed through civilian transit sectors. 7 minutes later, firing began. 14 minutes after that, the station suffered cascading systems failure. Is any part of that sequence false? No, Adrian said. Core inclined his head. Good. Then we spare the chamber unnecessary fog. Armed human personnel entered. Violence followed. Civilians died. He let the last word settle. Adrian did not move. He had known Core would begin here, with the shape of the event instead of its cause. Strip away the context. Compress the timeline. Turn sequence into guilt. Core tapped his console, and a three-dimensional schematic of Halcyon appeared above the floor between them. Docking rings, freight spines, transit shell, medical quarter, core relay column. You commanded the internal response team from this point, Core said, highlighting a security concourse overlooking the transfer lanes. Correct. Yes. You overrode station security channels. Yes. You authorized live weapons. Yes. A murmur ran through the upper gallery. Core let it swell before speaking again. And you did so inside a civilian facility governed by Council Protection Accords. Yes, Adrian said. Even Ambassador Marr turned her head a fraction. Not in surprise. In calculation. Adrian knew exactly how it sounded to anyone who wanted a clean story. Human Captain admits every dangerous thing. Human Captain confirms every legal hinge. Core stepped closer to the witness arc. Then perhaps you will assist us with a smaller question. On what authority did you decide that your judgment outweighed the law applying to every civilized power in this chamber? Adrian looked at him, then at the schematic. Because by the time I took control, the law was no longer protecting the people inside that station. The chamber did not erupt. It tightened. That was worse. Core's upper right hand flexed once. A phrase, not an answer. It is both. Then support it. Adrian swallowed once, easing the dryness in his throat. The room was still trying to frame Halcyon as a question of procedure. He needed to pull it back to what had actually happened. At 0337, we received a distress packet from Halcyon Medical Quarter, he said. It was coded first as a pressure event. Then the second packet included signs of sudden biometric collapse in 2 sealed corridors. At 0339, our signal team detected a blind patch spreading through the station's internal net. Cameras went dark in sections that should not have gone dark together. At 0340, a child transport manifest disappeared from public routing and reappeared on a maintenance channel tied to freight. Lift 7. Core tilted his head. And from that, you concluded a military assault was underway. I concluded the station was being taken apart from inside. Taken apart, Core repeated. By whom? We did not know yet. So you acted on uncertainty. We acted on a moving threat. Uncertainty, Core said again, louder this time. Adrian could hear the soft cascade of updated text moving across the public gallery screens. The hearing was already being clipped live. Human Captain admits he acted before confirming attacker identity. Human Captain used force on incomplete information. The machine around the chamber had been prepared for that moment. Core folded 2 hands behind his back. Captain Vale, this chamber has heard many defenses built on fear. Fear is common. Restraint is civilization. Tell this chamber exactly what you saw with your own eyes before you authorized live fire. Adrian saw it again before he answered. The blackened service arch smoke hanging too low because pressure balance had already started to fail. The station medic with blood bright against the white of her neck seal. The boy in the orange evac band crying without sound because the corridor alarms were too loud. I saw a station nurse trying to seal a blast door with one arm burned to the bone, he said. I saw 2 freight workers down with puncture wounds that matched no civilian tool on the deck. I saw a maintenance drone carrying shaped charges under a sanitation skin. I saw station security officers dead before they had finished drawing sidearms. For the first time, Core did not cut in immediately. Adrian kept going. I also saw a false all-clear running on the public speakers while people were being redirected away from safe zones and toward lift banks that had already been locked. That mattered more than the legal wording. Anyone in the chamber could understand what it meant. People have been told they were safe while being pushed into the wrong direction. The chamber screens shifted to legal annotation. False guidance during mass casualty events. Civilian endangerment. Akal brioche. None of it yet attached to any species or flag. Core recovered first. Again, you describe chaos, tragedy, confusion. You do not yet describe an external attack force. Nor do you explain why an Earth officer seized a Council station. Because the station command net was compromised. Prove it. Adrian almost smiled at the word. He had waited 12 days to hear it spoken in this room. Read the relay origin on the evacuation reversal orders, he said. A few heads turned. Core did not. The chamber is examining your conduct, Captain, not relitigating station administration. Then you should want the relay origin. The pressure in the room shifted by a degree. It was a small change, but Adrian felt it. Not because he had won anything yet, because the case was starting to move away from him alone. Core tapped his console. A transcript block appeared in the air. Emergency routing revision, he read. Issued under Halcyon Civil Safety Protocol 9. Direct civilian flow to lower freight axis pending biohazard containment. There's your order. Where is the miracle hidden inside it? In the source lattice. Core looked toward the central dais. Voss gave a small motion. Display source lattice, Core said. The command string unfolded beside the order. Routing chain. Timestamp. Relay authentication. Clearance stamp. Adrian watched the chamber absorb it. Most of them would not understand it at a glance. That was fine. The truth did not need every ear at once. It only needed a few precise minds to recognize the crack. Read the relay path aloud, Adrian said. Core's expression hardened. This is not your examination. Read it anyway. Voss intervened before the exchange sharpened. High Advocate, read the path. Core obeyed because he had to. Halcyon local node to Meridian subnet, then redirected through Compliance Mirror 6, then returned under Civil Authority designation. And Halcyon Civil Safety orders do not route through Compliance Mirror 6, Adrian said. Silence held for half a beat. Then Council technicians in 2 separate analyst pits bent over their consoles at once. Core stayed very still. Your source for that claim? I was on the Joint Corridor Review Task Force after the Naren famine convoys, Adrian said. I signed the station protection templates. Civil safety commands route through public redundancy chains so mixed species rescue teams can verify them fast. Compliance Mirror 6 is a sealed oversight relay. It exists to archive flagged legal events, not to issue crowd movement instructions. When the technical analyst spoke before being recognized, then stopped himself, the damage was done. The chamber had heard the alarm in his voice. Voss turned to the analyst pit. You have something? The senior analyst stood. Preliminary verification, arbiter. The witness is correct. Compliance Mirror 6 should not have been in the command path. A murmur rolled across every tier now, heavier than before. Not outrage yet. Confusion. Confusion was better. Confusion loosened certainty. Core shifted without changing tone. Even if that irregularity stands, it does not absolve your decision to weaponize an aid escort inside a civilian station. No, Adrian said. It explains why the station became a kill box before we ever fired. That was the first real turn. You could feel the chamber recognize it, even if no one wanted to say it aloud. Core's gaze sharpened. He knew the room was slipping a fraction away from him, so he attacked the witness instead of the evidence. You speak with great confidence for a man who survived while so many under his protection did not. The sentence landed exactly where it had been aimed. The public gallery quieted. Even the translation field seemed to lower its breath. Adrian felt the old heat in his chest then. Not rage. The other thing. The one that came when grief was handled by someone who had not earned the right to touch it. I survived because Chief Medic Sarah Dane sealed me inside a cargo recess and took the corridor herself, he said. Lieutenant Mikhail Rowe ran back toward the nursery deck when he should have run with me. Station engineer Povil cut 3 manual locks with a welding torch after the system denied every override. None of them survived. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. I will not let you use their deaths as decoration on your argument. Core let the words pass, perhaps thinking they had reached the edge of sentiment. He was wrong. Adrian looked not at Core now, but at the chamber itself, at tiers of faces and lenses and translated expressions. You want to know why we drew live weapons? Because the people killing that station had already rewritten the safety system to herd families into dead ends. Because station security had been cut off from its own doors. Because someone with access above local authority had built a false incident, so the first minutes would look like a malfunction instead of an attack. And because by the time we understood that every minute of restraint cost civilians blood, there was not proof yet, but shape. The chamber could now see something larger than a reckless human captain. Core sensed it too. Captain Vale, did you identify any attackers in human, Varesh, Valoran, or Ilya military service? No. Did you capture any infiltrator alive? No. Did you secure any direct confession? No. Core spread two hands. So after all of this, you still stand before us offering interpretation. Adrian looked toward Ambassador Mar. She did not move, but her eyes held him. Steady. Not approval. Not warning. Permission to keep going if he had the ground. He had not even opened the real ground yet. Request permission, he said, to submit command record 714 from Resolute Dawn Internal Archive. Core's head turned sharply. The Earth delegation shifted as one. Not in surprise that the record existed. In surprise that he had named it here. Undersecretary Eridan leaned toward Ambassador Mar and said something too low for the chamber mics. Mar answered without looking at him. Voss regarded Adrian for a long second. Was this record previously disclosed to Inquiry Council? Adrian answered truthfully. No, that set off a sharper stir than anything before. Procedure mattered to institutions almost as much as guilt. Core's voice cooled another degree. Captain, this chamber does not reward theatrics. It is not theater, Adrian said. It is the reason Halcyon happened. Ambassador Mar rose. Arbiter, Earth requests leave to address the issue of non-disclosure. Voss nodded once. You may. Mar placed both hands on the delegation desk. The record named by Captain Vale was sealed under Earth casualty protection and command continuity law following the loss of senior officers aboard Resolute Dawn. I was informed of its existence 3 hours before this hearing. I have not yet moved to submit it because chain authentication required one living command witness. Core turned to her. You withheld material evidence from a binding inquiry. We preserve a chain that could not be challenged as fabricated by secondary legal staff, Mars said. If the chamber prefers speed over admissibility, it may say so clearly for the archive. That hit harder than Adrian expected. It was not a defense of him. It was a strike at the room itself. Decide what matters more, procedure or truth. Voss made the decision. Submit the record. Core objected at once. The authority has not examined provenance. You will, Voss said. Now, the air above the center floor dimmed. A sealed file icon appeared, ringed in red and white. Adrian knew the sequence by memory. He had listened to it alone 4 times in a dark recovery room, while half-medicated and shaking hard enough that he could barely keep the playback aligned. The file opened. First came static, then a voice. Commander Imani Sato of the Resolute Dawn, dead at Halcyon, speaking from the tactical deck 4 minutes before the first civilian crowd reversal order went live. This is Command Lock Record 714, she said. Her voice was calm, too calm. We have unauthorized command echo on station traffic. Origin does not match local admin signature. Repeat, does not match local admin signature. Relay chain indicates external insertion. The chamber leaned in without moving. Adrian had heard that kind of silence before, on ships, just before battle calculations finished. Sato continued. Security patch 2 failed. We attempted a clean route around the mirror relay. The relay answered with valid arbitration key. A technician in the analyst pit swore softly before muting his own mic. Core's face did not change. It did not have to. The change had already reached the seats behind him. Sato's voice went on. If this record survives, note for any lawful review. No station side office should possess that key. Marking event as intentional system capture. Then a second voice broke in, harsher and breathless. Lieutenant Mikkel Rowe. Commander, nursery deck just got redirected. They're sending the evac group down Freight 7. Sato answered instantly. Override it. Can't. It's coming stamped from Conduct Authority Compliance. The chamber did not murmur this time. It froze. That was the moment the hearing stopped being only about Adrian's judgment. The room felt it all at once. Adrian felt the floor under his boots more sharply than before. This was the moment he had carried in his chest for 12 days. Not because it would save him, but because it would finally place the dead where they belonged, inside the truth rather than buried under it. Core found his voice first. Playback authenticity is not established, he said, and for the first time he sounded like a man running to catch something instead of guiding it. Voss looked to the technical pit. Establish it. The analysts moved quickly now. Separate teams. Separate paths. Separate checks. Chain signatures. Archife south. Temporal drift. Voice print. Every second took too long. Undersecretary Erden leaned toward Adrian from the Earth desk and said, too softly for most ears, "You should have brought this to us sooner." Adrian turned his head, just enough to answer. "I did." Erden's jaw tightened. That was all. The senior analyst stood again. Preliminary authentication complete. No evidence of post-event edit. Voice print confidence above threshold. Archive salts consistent with shipboard deadlock protocol. Not final. Good enough. Core pivoted instantly. Even if accepted, the record indicates only a forged authority stamp during a crisis. That does not prove council involvement, nor does it prove your subsequent use of force was lawful. Adrian nodded. It proves more than that. Core stared at him. Because that arbitration key was not just valid. It was alive. The translation field rendered the word into 13 languages and 2 signal systems. Alive. Biolocate. Bound to a living office holder. For the first time, presiding arbiter Voss leaned forward. Clarify. Adrian touched the witness console. Display addendum from record 714. A smaller file unfolded beneath the audio log. A metadata lattice. Ugly. Dense. Hard to read for anyone outside operations or forensic command. During the event, Adrian said, our systems officer ran a last-pass scrape before his station burned out. He tagged the arbitration key with its living signature echo. We could not name it then because half the command deck was gone and the ship was breaking apart. But the echo remained. Core cut across him. And you are now prepared to accuse a council official of murder based on battlefield noise? No, Adrian said. I am prepared to ask the chamber why a sealed compliance relay issued civilian movement orders under a living authority imprint that should never have been on Halcyon at all. Every seat in the chamber felt occupied now. No one drifted. No one consulted a side screen without looking back. Voss spoke with controlled weight. Technical pit. Can living imprint residue be compared against known arbitration offices? The senior analyst did not answer immediately. He looked to 2 other stations, received confirmation, then rose. Yes, arbiter. If chamber authority is granted. Granted. Core lifted a hand. The authority objects to any phishing comparison against protected office holders without threshold cause. Voss did not even look at him. Threshold has arrived. The analyst began the cross-match. Adrian felt his pulse in his repaired shoulder. He had not known, in the recovery room, whether this moment would ever. Culme. He had only known that when he replayed Sato's last minutes, one detail refused to leave him. She had said valid arbitration key. Not forged to look valid. Valid. Beside the Earth desk, Ambassador Mar closed her hands once and let them rest. It was the smallest sign of tension he had seen from her. Core made one more move before the result came back. Captain Vale, let's speak plainly about motive. Your vessel had already filed 3 corridor protests in the previous quarter regarding Valoran freight inspection rights. You had publicly criticized the Council's handling of refugee routing after the Oars collapse. You were not a neutral actor stepping into disaster. You were a human officer already primed to distrust this chamber. Adrian turned to him. I distrusted bad corridor policy. I did not expect someone to use a protected station as a slaughter pen. Strong language. Accurate language. Core took another step, as if proximity itself could restore control. And after all your claims, you still cannot place a soldier, agent, or official in the corridor with a weapon in hand. No, Adrian said, because the people who built this were smarter than that. That line struck harder than he intended. A few heads in the middle tiers shifted toward Core, then toward the central dais. Not accusation. Possibility. Possibility was poison in a chamber built on certainty. The analyst pit lit green across one row and amber across another. The senior analyst stood so fast that his chair rolled backward. Arbiter, he said. The whole chamber tilted toward him. We have a match. No one breathed loudly enough to be heard. Name it, Voss said. The analyst looked shaken, and that told Adrian more than the words would. Living arbitration imprint corresponds to the Office of Council Oversight Commissioner Darien Sol. Confidence 97.2. The chamber did not erupt. It locked. Darien Sol sat 2 tiers below the central emblem, far from the witness floor, draped in the dark blue of a permanent oversight office. Adrian had noticed him only once before the hearing, because Sol had kept his face in the careful neutrality of someone confident the room belonged to process. That neutrality was gone now. Sol half rose, then checked himself. This is absurd. An imprint echo can be harvested, copied, refracted. The witness is staging inference as fact. Voss's gaze moved to him slowly. Sit down, Commissioner. Sol sat. Core found himself in the worst possible place. If he pushed too hard against the result, he looked attached to it. If he retreated, he abandoned the case he had built across 12 days. He chose the middle and failed in both directions. The chamber should note, he said, that an office imprint does not establish personal authorization. It establishes access, Adrian said. Core rounded on him. It establishes the possibility of theft. Yes, Adrian said, which means either a council commissioner directed the relay capture or someone stole living authority from inside the one office tasked with safeguarding review channels. Pick whichever version lets you sleep. A sound moved across the gallery then, not quite laughter and not quite shock. It died instantly, but it had happened. The chamber had felt its balance shift. Voss raised one hand. Commissioner Sol, did your office conduct any operation at or through Halcyon Transfer Station on the day in question? No, Sol said. Did any relay under your office receive event traffic from Halcyon before public alert issuance? No. The senior analyst spoke again, unable to stay silent. Arbiter, Mirror 6 did receive pre-alert traffic. Timestamp confirms 4 minutes before station-wide casualty notice. Sol turned toward the analyst pit with naked anger now. Then your system map is wrong. It is not wrong, the analyst said. Adrian watched the chamber absorb something deeper than scandal. It was not only that a key had been used. It was that oversight itself had touched the event before the public even knew the event existed. Ambassador, Mar rose again. Earth moves for immediate suspension of proceedings against Captain Vale and for the opening of a parallel criminal inquiry into command relay intrusion, wrongful civilian redirection, and the use of protected authority channels during mass casualty onset. Core turned on her. You would exploit uncertainty to evade accountability. No, Mars said. I would stop your office from convicting a witness before this chamber asks who built the fire. There was the second layer, visible now to everyone. Not only the event, but the rush to assign blame before the event had been understood. Voss looked down to Adrian. Captain Vale, why was this not in your initial testimony packet? The answer had sat in Adrian's chest for days like metal. Because 2 people from Earth told me not to. Use it unless the chamber forced the line open. Every eye that could turn toward the Earth desk did. Undersecretary Aridin went pale by tiny degrees. Mar did not. Voss's voice cooled. Name them. Adrian looked first at Aridin, then beyond him, not to embarrass but to state. Undersecretary Paul, Aridin, and Rear Advisor Cale Moreau from Strategic External Defense. Off-record contact through Medical Recovery Channel. The upper gallery flared in sound. This time Voss had to strike the gavel field once to restore order. Aridin stood too quickly. That is a distortion. I advise caution regarding unverified material that could trigger interstellar conflict. You advised silence, Adrian said. I advised lawful sequencing. You told me if I named a living council office without chamber preparation, Earth could be blamed for destabilization. Eridan's mouth tightened. Because it was true. There it was. The third layer of pressure finally dragged into the light. Not enemy. Not ally. The fearful machinery of one's own side, deciding which truth could be afforded. Adrian did not hate Eridan for it. That was the worst part. The man had not been trying to kill him. He had been trying to manage fallout. Systems did that. They measured truth against cost and called it adulthood. But Halcyon had already cost too much. Voss took a longer pause now, weighing more than evidence. He was weighing whether the chamber still belonged to the script laid before it when the hearing opened. When he spoke, his words came flat and final. Captain Vale is no longer being examined as principal fault party until the relay intrusion matter is resolved. High Advocate Corps, your present line is suspended. Corps began. Arbiter, the dead still require the dead, Voss said, cutting through him. Require the truth before they require your convenience. That line crossed the chamber like clean steel. Even the public gallery held still enough to feel it. Soul rose again despite the order. This proceeding is compromised. The witness is emotionally unstable. The Earth delegation has withheld evidence, and technical staff are overstepping. Adrian turned toward him at last. You knew about the station before the first public alert. Soul stared back. No. Then why did Mirror 6 open? No. Then who in your office was awake at that hour with access to a sealed compliance relay? Core objected, but the objection sounded small. Soul did not answer. Adrian pressed because he had to, not from fury, from duty to the ones who had not made it out. At Halcyon, someone redirected nursery families away from the medical spine and into Freight 7. Freight 7 was later vented after shaped charges broke the pressure lock. If you are innocent, Commissioner, then say right now which name in your office can explain that route. Soul's silence lasted only 3 seconds. In a normal room, it would have been nothing. In that chamber, under live archive and 1,000 watching eyes, it was a wound opening. Voss turned to chamber security. Commissioner Darien Soul is restricted pending review. His office channels are frozen. Technical custody will isolate Mirror 6 logs now. The security officers moved at once. Not toward Adrian. Toward Soul. That was the moment the chamber truly changed. Not the file. Not the match. The sight of officers approaching a permanent council commissioner while the human witness remained standing unshackled in the center light. The gallery broke into layered voices. Translators flashed. Feeds updated so fast that the public overlays lagged behind speech. Adrian let the noise move around him. His legs felt unsteady now, as if the body that had held through the hardest minutes finally wanted its due. Mar stepped toward the rail as chamber marshals formed a discreet line between desks. Stay upright, she said quietly. I'm trying. You did more than that. Adrian did not answer. He was looking at Soul, not in triumph, but because he wanted to know whether a face could reveal anything when cornered by the truth. It could. Not guilt exactly. Guilt was too simple. What crossed Soul's face looked more like fury that a lesser actor had refused his assigned role. A witness was supposed to confirm damage, not alter hierarchy. Voss restored order by increments. This hearing stands recessed for 1 hour. At reconvening, the chamber will hear technical testimony, office access testimony, and an amended sequence of station events. Captain Vale remains available under protection. No party will contact him off record. That last line was aimed at more than one desk. The tone rolled again. Session pause. Only then did Adrian realize how badly his shoulder was trembling. A chamber medic approached, but Adrian waved them off and stepped down from the witness platform under escort. The public gallery watched him with the stunned. Focus usually reserved for wars or coronations. He hated that. He had not come here for spectacle. He had come because Sarah Dane had died holding a door and someone in power had expected the dead to carry the blame quietly. The side anteroom reserved for witnesses was colder than the main chamber. It had gray walls, filtered water, 2 security officers, and no windows. Adrian sat on the edge of the bench and closed his eyes for exactly 5 seconds before the door opened and Ambassador Mar entered. She shut the door behind her herself. You hid that addendum from everyone. I hid it from the wrong people. That includes me. Yes. Mar stood with her hands behind her back, studying him the way experienced diplomats studied storms, not asking whether they existed, measuring how far they would reach. You made my job harder, she said. I know. You may also have saved every human ship in the narrow reach from sanctions. I know that less. Mar looked at him for another moment, then sat opposite him. Tell me now why you did not trust Earth external affairs. Adrian laughed once, without humor, because they met me in recovery before they met the families. That landed. Mar did not move, but it landed. Eridan told me Earth needed stability, Adrian said. He said if I named a council office too early, the case would turn into a constitutional fight and the dead would vanish into legal smoke. He was probably right. Then he told me the system could deal with wrongdoing later if I kept my testimony limited now. And what did you hear? I heard him ask me to trade sequence for peace. Mar nodded once. He may tell himself that is statecraft. It is. That does not make it enough. No. The room settled into the kind of silence shared only by tired adults who knew both things could be true. Eridan had been wrong. He had also been acting inside the logic of nations. Adrian hated that it was not as simple as calling him a coward. Mar leaned forward slightly. There is something you did not say in the chamber. You looked at Sol as if you were still missing a piece. I am. What piece? Adrian rubbed the heel of his hand over his repaired shoulder, then lowered it. Halcyon was too precise. The relay capture, the false all-clear, the sealed routes, the timing on Freight 7. That took more than one corrupt office or one power grab. Someone wanted the station to become a mass casualty event that looked like human overreaction. That points to a motive beyond corridor politics. Mar's eyes narrowed. Who benefits? Anyone who wanted Earth out of the reach fast, Adrian said. Anyone who needed the refugee lanes reclassified. Anyone moving material through those lanes under reduced scrutiny. Mar stood again. Technical review just found something else. Halcyon's nursery evacuation list was altered 12 hours before the attack. Names removed, names inserted. Adrian felt cold move through him. Families were targeted, not by species, Mar said, by transport history. He looked up sharply. Convoy records? Yes. The deleted names belonged to local residents. The inserted names had all transited through the Oris refugee corridor within the last year. Adrian saw the shape before she finished. Witnesses, perhaps. Carriers, couriers, or someone wanted specific survivors dead before they could move again. Mar held his gaze. When the chamber reconvenes, it will still be about Halcyon on the surface. Underneath Halcyon, there may be something older and broader. Adrian nodded slowly. The Oris corridor. That is my reading. He sat back. The room felt smaller now, not because danger had grown, but because history had stepped into it. The Oris collapse had pushed millions through unstable transit lines. Earth had taken public heat for how loudly it criticized the Council's handling of the rescue lanes. Valoran freight houses had made fortunes during the confusion. Oversight offices had claimed extraordinary powers to keep order. A protected station. A false incident. Families with the wrong travel history pushed into a vented freight tube. This was not random. The door opened again. One of the security officers stepped in. Ambassador, reconvening in 12 minutes. Technical teams request the witness review an access map. Mar rose. Bring it. The map arrived as a layered projection across the anteroom table. Adrian stood despite the pain and leaned over it with the analysts. Mirror 6. Halcyon Command Shell. Freight 7. Nursery Deck. Medical Quarter. Then a line no one had noticed in the first sweep because it was buried inside a maintenance handshake. What is this node? Adrian asked. The analyst enlarged it. Subesment archive handshake. Tiny packet. Automatic by appearance. Timestamp. She read it and went. Quiet. It had fired 28 seconds before Freight 7 vented. That made the next turn matter immediately. This was no longer just about who corrupted the relay. It was about where the trap pointed after it was sprung. Open it. Arbiter authority is needed. Mar looked to the security officer. Get it. The authority came back in 90 seconds. The packet opened into a single outgoing pulse routed off station through a commercial freight registry, then lost among legal traffic. But the destination code was there for a fraction of a second before masking. Valoran bonded storage sector, ring 3. Mar exhaled slowly. Trade combined. The analyst nodded. Or someone using their freight registry as cover. Good enough for a second line, Adrian said. Mar looked at him. When we go back in, Core will try to reclaim the chamber by narrowing everything. He will say none of this proves intent. He will say the witness is reaching. He will say Earth is leveraging grief. He will also be partly right, Adrian said. We do not have the whole architecture yet. No, Mar said, but we have enough to stop the lie. That, Adrian thought, was sometimes the first real victory. Not proving everything, just making the old version impossible to keep. The chamber was louder when they returned. Not openly chaotic. Worse, order panic. Representatives conferring in tight clusters. Analysts carrying sealed briefs. Security doubled along the commissioner tier. Sol's seat now empty, ringed by frozen access lights. Adrian took the witness platform again. His body hurt more this time, but the pain had become useful. It kept him from drifting. Voss reopened the session with no ceremonial language. Technical testimony first. For the next 40 minutes, the chamber listened as analysts confirmed what the hearing had not been meant to hear. The relay path had been unlawful. The authority imprint had matched Sol's office. Mirror 6 had received pre-alert traffic. Freight 7 had been shaped into a civilian trap. The false all-clear had delayed generalized flight by more than 2 minutes. Core fought on precision, because precision was all he had left. Can you prove Commissioner Sol himself issued the command? No, the lead analyst said. Can you prove the witness knew all this when he opened fire? No. Can you prove that Earth Force did not worsen casualties during station combat? The analyst paused. No. Core turned toward the chamber like a man gathering scattered pieces. Then let the archive show this clearly. Serious irregularities in oversight channels do not erase the possibility that Captain Vale escalated a disaster into a massacre. Adrian waited for the line to land. It was a good line. Dangerous because it was partly plausible. Voss looked to Ambassador Mar. Does Earth respond? Mar rose, then did something Adrian did not expect. She did not answer herself. Captain Vale, she said, respond. Core objected immediately. The witness is not counsel. No, Mar said. He is the man you tried to bury beneath the event. Let him describe the event. Voss allowed it. Adrian rested his hands on the rail again. At 0343, my team entered Concourse 9 because station security tags had gone dark and civilian routing had been falsified. At 0344, we encountered hostile drones under maintenance skins and 2 shooters in emergency shell suits without faction markings. At 0345, we tried non-lethal suppressors on the first drone and lost 1 officer when the casing detonated internally. After that, live weapons were authorized because the threat was not crowd panic. It was a coordinated kill operation using disguised assets. He kept his voice plain, almost procedural, not because the story lacked pain, but because plain truth carried better in a room like this. At 0346, I sent half my team toward the nursery deck because the routed families were moving the wrong way. At 0348, Lieutenant Rowe reported Freight 7 locked and pressure anomalies building. At 0349, we reached service access above the freight shaft. We cut 1 manual lock. We could not cut the second before the vent. The room held. There were children in that lift bank, he said. There were parents. There were station attendants. There were 2 medical volunteers from Earth who had been off shift and went back for strangers. He looked at Core then, directly. If you want to ask whether my team added to the chaos, ask it. Rescue under attack is chaos. But do not ask this chamber to confuse the people who ran into the fire with the people who wrote the route into it. Could it not reply at once? For the first time since the hearing opened, He looked not dominant or calm or even angry. He looked cornered by the shape of his own case. He had built a prosecution around a reckless human officer. Now the officer sounded like the most reliable man in the room. One of the Valoran delegates activated her desk light. The trade combined requests recognition. Granted, she rose. Her scaled face was unreadable to human eyes, but her voice carried heat. The chamber has heard insinuation regarding Valoran freight registry masking. We reject any suggestion that combined systems supported an attack on Halcyon. Mar answered before Voss had to ask. Then open ring 3 bonded storage ledgers for the day in question. The Valoran delegate hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Everyone heard it. Our ledgers, she said carefully, are commercially protected. Mar's reply came like ice. And 38 civilians are not. The gallery stirred again. Voss intervened. The chamber orders temporary access under casualty exception. The Valoran delegate stiffened. Arbiter, that would expose it will expose what it exposes, Voss said. The request went out. The registry pulled in. What came back did not prove the entire conspiracy. It did not need to. It showed an unregistered priority container moving through Ring 3 under emergency seal 2 hours after Halcyon went dark, with payment authorization tied to a shell office under council oversight discretionary review. Not proof of murder. Proof of coordination after the fact. That mattered because it carried the story one step further. First the relay, then the trap. Now the attempt to move something through the aftermath. Mar did not overplay it. That made it stronger. Someone used oversight channels before the attack and trade masking after the attack, she said. This chamber may decide later how wide the rod is. For now, it should stop pretending Halcyon began with human gunfire. That was the phrase the hearing would carry outward into every system by the hour. Halcyon did not begin with human gunfire. Adrian felt it move through the room. Not victory. Correction. Core tried one final route. Captain Vale, you accuse systems, offices, registries, and procedures. Yet you still cannot tell us the names of the people in the shell suits. You still cannot tell us which hand planted the charges. Is it possible your grief has made pattern where only disaster existed? The question would have broken a weaker witness because it attacked the center line. Not evidence. Mind. Adrian answered slowly, so no word. Will be lost. No. Grief did the opposite. It stripped away everything decorative. What remained was sequence. Someone captured authority. Someone redirected families. Someone protected the command path long enough to trap them. Someone masked the aftermath through freight. I do not need all the names to know disaster did not write itself. He let the chamber sit with that. Also, he added, one of the shell suit shooters was not unknown. That hit every tier at once. Core's head snapped up. You withheld a visual identification? No, I failed to trust it at first. Explain. Adrian touched the witness console again. Display Concourse 9 helmet breach still. The image appeared grainy and brutal. Smoke. Motion blur. A figure in an emergency shell suit half-turned as the helmet cracked under impact. The face inside lasted less than a second. Enough. The chamber recognized him before Core spoke the name. Assistant Director Marin Quist, Deputy Operations Chief under Commissioner Sol. Missing since the Halcyon event. Publicly listed as on leave for stress collapse. The public gallery broke then, not into chaos, but into something close to disbelief. Quist had signed 3 public statements expressing sorrow over the station tragedy. Voss struck the gavel field twice. Silence. Adrian kept speaking because if he stopped, the room would drown in its own reaction. I saw the face for less than a second. I thought pain or smoke had twisted it. Then I saw the still in recovery and could not unknow it. Core looked as if he had aged in 1 minute. The Valoran delegate shut off her own mic and spoke rapidly to aides. The Ilia Concord representatives drew inward into a huddle. On the Earth desk, Eridan sat motionless with the expression of a man realizing his caution had tried to save a structure that had already chosen its own ruin. Voss did not hesitate now. Full detainment order from Marin Quist. Cross-system notice immediate. Freeze all oversight discretionary channels. Secure Ring 3 bonded storage. The chamber security field brightened across half the room. And then, for the first time since the hearing began, Adrian allowed himself to think of the dead not as burdens he was carrying uphill alone, but as names that might finally stand inside the right story. Sohadan, Mikhail Rowe Povel, the nursery attendant with the cracked wrist seal whose name he had learned only from A. Casualty list, the parents in Freight 7, the children he had not reached in time. The hearing did not end there, because institutions never ended when human hearts wanted them to. There were more questions, more technical clarifications, more fights over wording, jurisdiction, custody, and whether the case now belonged to criminal review, emergency tribunal, or special chamber oversight. But the central lie had been broken. No one could put it back. By the time Voss called the final session phase, the gallery no longer looked at Adrian as a reckless human officer. It looked at him as the man who had stood where a system expected collapse and had instead made the system answer for itself. Voss's closing remarks were brief. This chamber finds that the prior framing of Captain Adrian Vale as primary causal party in the destruction of Halcyon Transfer Station is unsupported by the evidence now before us. The chamber orders a full criminal inquiry into unlawful authority use, civilian route manipulation, and post-event concealment. Pending that inquiry, no sanction motion against Earth arising from the Halcyon event shall proceed. A held breath released somewhere high in the Earth tier. Voss continued. This chamber also notes with seriousness that relevant material was constrained not only by hostile manipulation, but by the caution of parties who feared systemic instability more than delayed truth. Let that note remain in the archive. That was aimed at Eridan. Akor, at half the room. Then Voss looked directly at Adrian. Captain Vale, the chamber records that your actions occurred inside a manufactured mass casualty environment. Questions of tactical proportionality may be reviewed later under separate standards. They will not define this event. It was as close to exoneration as a chamber like this could give in one day. More important, it placed sequence where sequence belonged. Adrian nodded once. Understood. The tone sounded. Session closed. People rose in waves. Feeds ended. Security units moved in organized channels. The immense machinery of public judgment began converting itself into the slower machinery of legal survival. Adrian remained at the rail longer than he needed to because his knees had decided, at last, to admit exhaustion. When he stepped down, Ambassador Marr was there before anyone else. You changed the corridor map today, she said. Maybe. No. Definitely. She did not offer triumph. Good. Triumph would have dishonored the cost. What happens now? Adrian asked. Marr looked back toward the commissioner tier, where technicians were already stripping frozen access nodes. Now everyone who called Earth unstable begins claiming they always wanted accountability. Now 3 governments try to firewall themselves from the oversight scandal. Now we learn whether Halcyon was the opening move in a corridor seizure or the cleanup of something older. Adrian nodded. And me? Marr's expression softened by a fraction. You go see the families before Earth turns you into a symbol. That almost made him smile. Across the aisle, Undersecretary Eridan approached with the posture of a man uncertain whether apology would still count as dignity. He stopped 2 steps away. Captain, he said. Adrian waited. Eridan looked older now than he had that morning. I was trying to prevent escalation. I know. That sounds generous coming from you. It is not generosity. It is sequence. Eridan absorbed the answer. I should have trusted that the chamber could take the hit. No, Adrian said. You should have trusted the dead to carry more weight than the structure. That one hurt. It was supposed to. Eridan lowered his eyes briefly, then straightened. If Earth proceeds with the criminal inquiry delegation, Ambassador Marr will need an operations advisor with direct event knowledge. Adrian understood the offer beneath the words. Not absolution. Work. I'll do it, he said. Eridan nodded once and left. The public corridors outside the chamber were wider than they had seemed that morning. Or perhaps Adrian's mind was no longer narrowed to the witness rail. Reporters waited behind security veils, their questions translated into scrolling requests. He ignored them all. The family reception room had been set aside for casualty relatives and accredited support staff. It overlooked Meridian Prime through a long reinforced window, cloud bands silver under distant lightning. The room was quieter than the chamber by 1,000 miles. Some of the families were there in person. Others appeared by live link from Earth, from reach colonies, from ships between systems. No one applauded when he entered. He was grateful for that. A woman with tired eyes and a station worker badge pinned to her jacket stood first. Poville's sister, if Adrian remembered correctly. Did they hear it? She asked. He knew what she meant. Not the hearing itself. The truth. Yes, he said. They heard it. She closed her eyes and let out a breath that seemed to have been waiting 12 days. Another voice came through one of the link screens. Sarah Dane's father, gray-haired, rigid, holding himself together by effort. Did they say her name? Adrian stepped closer to the screen. I did. The man nodded once. No theirs. Just that. A father receiving the smallest possible justice and holding it like something breakable. For the next hour, Adrian answered questions no chamber archive would ever carry. Was she afraid? Did he say anything at the end? Was he alone? Did anyone help the children? Were they conscious when the pressure went? Did they know? He answered all of it as cleanly as he could. No de queruti merci. No cruelty either. By the time he left the reception room, the local meridian cycle had turned. Artificial lights shifted cooler along the corridor. The station outside the council chamber continued its vast, indifferent work. Cargo moved. Servitors swept polished floors. Policy aides walked fast with sealed briefs. Systems survived scandals by continuing to hum. Mar found him again near a transit balcony overlooking the lower diplomatic docks. There's one more thing. He leaned against the rail, careful of his shoulder. There always is. We intercepted a sealed message 30 minutes ago, she said. Maren Quist is missing, but her private relay sent an automated dead man packet when the chamber froze Sol's office. Adrian looked at her. To whom? Mar handed him the tablet. The destination line was simple enough. Earth. Not government. Not military. A private resource consortium with humanitarian contracts in the Ors corridor. He read the name twice before it settled. Helix Meridian Relief Logistics. Earth-based. Publicly praised for rapid refugee support after the Ors collapse. Quietly suspected by convoy officers of buying distressed routes and reselling emergency priority at obscene margins. Mar watched him as he put the pieces together. That gave the wider pattern a clearer edge. What happened to Halcyon was no longer just a hidden council abuse. It touched corridor traffic, refugee flows, and money moving behind aid. Halcyon was not only about removing Earth from the reach, he said. It was about cleaning a witness chain tied to corridor fraud. That is my reading, Mars said. He stared through the balcony glass at the dark curve of Meridian Prime below, which means Earth was not only the target. No, Mars said, Earth was also the frame. That felt truer than he wanted it to. He handed the tablet back. What do you need from me now? Sleep, Mars said. He almost laughed. And after that, she looked down toward the diplomatic docks, where lights moved around arriving shuttles like small determined stars. After that, Captain, I need the man who memorized sequence while everyone else was drowning in narrative. He nodded. Then you have him. Mar hesitated, which was rare enough that Adrian noticed. For what it is worth, when this hearing opened, half the chamber thought you would break. He looked back toward the sealed doors of the council chamber. I know, you did not. Adrian thought of the bench in the witness room, the tremor in his repaired shoulder, the names of the dead spoken into a room that had expected procedure more than pain. Yes, he said quietly. I did. Mar frowned just slightly. He clarified before she could answer. I broke where it mattered. I just did it in the right direction. That was the closest he would come to honesty large enough for the day. Mar accepted it. Adults did that sometimes. They accepted the version of truth that did not need polishing. She left him there for a while. Below, shuttles came and went through the meridian dark. Somewhere in the station, technicians were pulling frozen logs from hidden relays. Somewhere else, Frightened officials were rewriting their statements. Somewhere on Earth, media hosts who had spent 12 days asking whether humanity had overreached at Halcyon were now changing their tone fast enough to preserve dignity. None of that mattered as much as the quiet fact, now fixed in the archive. Halcyon had not begun with human gunfire. It had begun with authority stolen, routes poisoned, and civilians moved like pieces through a killing design. Adrian had stepped into that design and failed to save everyone. He would carry that failure for the rest of his life. But the system had not been allowed to turn that failure into the first sentence and the last. He stood at the balcony until the pain in his shoulder grew sharp enough to force movement. Then he pushed off the rail and made his way toward the transit lift that would take him to the Earth delegation quarters. On the far wall above the lift doors, one of the public feeds was still catching up to the day. A commentator from the outer systems was replaying the hearing's turning point, his translated voice low with disbelief. The image on the screen showed Adrian at the witness rail, lit from above, smaller than the chamber around him, and somehow heavier than it. The commentator said, "This may be remembered as the hour the Council stopped asking whether Earth had gone too far and began asking what had been done behind Earth's back." Adrian watched the screen for a second, then stepped into the lift without waiting for the rest. He was too tired for symbols. He was not too tired for the next truth, because Halcyon was no longer a station tragedy alone. It was a seam pulled open in how the Reach had been governed since the Ore's collapse. A compliance office, a freight registry, a relief consortium from Earth itself. Enough greed, fear, and institutional self-protection braided together to make murder look administrative. That was what came next. Not glory, not vindication. Work. The lift doors opened onto the delegation tier. 2 Earth security officers straightened as he approached, then relaxed when they recognized him. One started to say something respectful, then stopped, perhaps realizing Adrian was past the point where ceremony helped. Inside the delegation suite, the lights were low. Half the staff had gone to follow-up rooms and emergency consultations. The other half sat over cold drinks and live legal feeds, all wearing the same stunned expression that follows days when a familiar world suddenly shows its hidden machinery. Adrian walked past them toward the small side office he had been assigned. On the desk waited a sealed packet and a single handwritten note from Ambassador Marr. "For when you wake." "We start with Oris." He set the note down and stood there a while longer, hands on the desk, staring at the curve of the letters. Not poetic, not dramatic, just clear. Good. He thought of Sarah Dane again then, because tired minds returned to the dead when rooms finally went quiet. He remembered her voice over internal comms at Halcyon telling frightened civilians to keep moving, keep low, keep breathing. He remembered Mikkel row turning back when he should have run. He remembered the impossible sound Freight 7 had made when the pressure lock went. He closed his eyes. "I got them to hear it," he said to the empty room. The room, like most rooms after war and near war, gave nothing back. That was all right. He was not speaking for comfort. When he finally lay down on the narrow berth, he did not sleep at once. His body shook itself empty in small waves now that no one was watching. He let it. There was no pride left to spend on holding still. Beyond the wall, the station continued to hum around Meridian Prime. Beyond that, the wider galaxy had already begun adjusting to a fact it had not expected to face when the hearing opened. Humanity had come into the chamber under accusation, under pressure, under the old assumption that it could be cornered cleanly if enough voices spoke at once. A single witness, scarred and tired, carrying names instead of ambition, had forced the larger structure to look at its own hands. That would not save the galaxy. It would not even clean the Reach by itself. But it would change what came next. And for one cycle, on one world above another world not his own, that was enough. What broke at Halcyon was never just a station. It was a lie dressed as order. A system so certain of its own power that it believed the dead could be filed away, the living could be silenced, and the truth could be buried under procedure. In the end, all it took was one human witness who refused to forget the right sequence, refused to let the fallen be blamed, and refused to let their names disappear into someone else's version of history. Maybe that was what made the room go silent. Not anger, not power, not even fear. Just the weight of the truth, spoken clearly at last. Because sometimes humanity does not win by having the biggest fleet, the loudest voice, or the strongest weapon. Sometimes humanity wins by standing in the dark, carrying the names of the dead, and saying, no, this is where it really began. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something, or if you want to follow what happens next in this galaxy, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who loves deep science fiction, and subscribe to the channel. Your support truly helps these stories keep going. And if you do subscribe, you will be here when the next signal arrives.